We become what we eat, and our body is the only thing that stays with us until the end. So why not take good care of it? And one of the ways to take good care of our bodies is by feeding it good foods. And when it comes to foods, there is all kinds of different diets available, but there's only one diet that has scientifically shown to reverse diseases. And what is that diet? That's whole foods plant-based diet. So today I'll give you 101 different reasons to adapt a whole foods plant-based diet. And let's get right into it. So what are the first few reasons? Well, those are the major diseases that are the leading causes of death, morbidity, and mortality in the world. And what are those diseases? Well, the first thing is obesity. So whole foods plant-based diet is shown to not only reduce body weight, but also people who eat plant-based diet are able to maintain their body weight at a lower or healthy range. Then high blood pressure. Whole foods plant-based diet has shown to reverse blood pressure problems, and people often are not required to, or they don't need to continue to take their blood pressure medicine. The next thing is high cholesterol. So when people are diagnosed with high cholesterol, if they adapt a healthy whole foods plant-based diet, oftentimes they don't need to take their cholesterol medicines. Then the next major thing is diabetes. Lots and lots of people who are diagnosed with diabetes, if they adapt a whole foods plant-based diet, their diabetes not only gets better, but actually oftentimes is reversed, and they don't have to take any medicine. Now, it requires persistence, but it does pay off. In my personal practice, everybody, not just a few patients, not just 50% of the patients, but 100% patients who had diabetes and they switched their diet to plant-based diet, they were actually able to reverse their diabetes. The next thing is atherosclerosis, which is thickening of the arteries, and often it happens as a result of plaque formation on the inside of the blood vessels, especially the major blood vessels. When people switch to whole foods plant-based diet, studies show that the atherosclerosis, or the process of hardening of the arteries, actually gets better. Now let's talk about cellular function and aging. So studies show that people who switch to whole foods plant-based diet, their cellular age improves, or they start to become younger at the cellular level. There is a test called telomeres test, and telomeres are basically the ends of chromosomes which determine what your cell's age is, and this determines longevity in the long run. So if our telomeres length is longer, then it means that we are younger, or we have longer years to live. And whole foods plant-based diet is shown to improve the telomeres length. So at the cellular level, you can become younger by switching to this diet. The next thing is immune function. So the plant-based diet is the diet that actually supports our immune system, and as a result of that, we stay healthy and we can fight off all kinds of different stresses and diseases. The next thing is oxidative stress. So whenever we are going through life, we do encounter all kinds of oxidative stress. It's just a normal part of life. When we eat, we exercise, we perform all kinds of activities, and whenever we are under stress, there are all kinds of metabolic reactions that go in the body and pose oxidative stress on us. This is not a really good thing because it makes us age. Now, plant-based diet is shown to combat oxidative stress and help us not get very old very fast. The next thing is longevity. So like I said earlier, not only the telomeres length improves, but also studies have shown that people who adopt plant-based diet are known to live longer lifespans. Some of those examples are people who live in the blue zones all across the world. So these people eat a lot of plants, and vast majority of the times they are either vegans or they just eat about 90% of the food from plant-derived sources. The next thing is healthy blood vessels. So not only the atherosclerosis, which is the hardening of the blood vessels, gets better with whole foods plant-based diet, but also people have better blood vessels in terms of their endothelial function, which means that the plasticity or the elasticity of the blood vessels is maintained with a whole foods plant-based diet. The next thing is, the next few things or reasons to switch to a whole foods plant-based diet is hormonal balance. So whenever we are going through the process of life, oftentimes our hormones kind of get out of balance, especially in women. So a plant-based diet helps maintain the balance of our hormones. The first one that I want to talk about is cortisol and DHEA. So cortisol is a stress hormone, and we all have spikes in cortisol in the morning, and as the day goes by, it starts to drop off. And why does it happen? That's a normal phenomenon. That's a normal thing. We need it because we need to get up in the morning and get out of bed. Now, in some people, the balance between cortisol and the counterpart of it, which is the DHEA, is disturbed because of a variety of reasons. And what happens is they end up with chronic fatigue. A whole foods plant-based diet has shown in the studies to maintain the balance, and if there is too much of cortisol level, is shown to lower the levels, as a result of which people improve their DHEA levels, which is very beneficial for proper metabolic functions. The next hormone which I want to talk about is estrogen and progesterone. So the estrogens and progesterone are female hormones, and they have a variety of different functions in the body. There are some women who have estrogen dominance and some who have progesterone dominance. And whenever there is an imbalance in the form of this dominance, then they end up with all kinds of different symptoms. And this happens primarily because the estrogen and the progesterone, which are metabolized in the liver, are not properly metabolized because there is too much stress in the body, or there is not enough antioxidants in the body. A whole foods plant-based diet is going to improve the levels of antioxidants and coenzymes and cofactors which are necessary for metabolism of estrogens and progesterone in the liver. So as a result of that, the balance in these hormones is achieved with this diet. The next thing is testosterone. So believe it or not, contrary to what people believe, that you need to eat a lot of animal-derived meat to improve the function of testosterone or improve the muscle mass. Actually, you need a lot of plants to convert your inactive testosterone to the active form so that it can function properly. And a whole foods plant-based diet will help you achieve that. The next few things are about metabolism. So as we know, whenever we eat, we have a tendency of eating more than what we need. So this happens because oftentimes our appetite centers are not regulated properly, and a whole foods plant-based diet is going to help regulate the appetite control. As a result, people who eat a lot of plants or a lot of vegetables and fruits do not end up overindulging in those foods, because they have satiety hormones released when they eat, and they tend to eat appropriately or appropriate quantities. The next thing is food addiction. So there is something called casomorphins. These are the peptides that are broken down from dairy products, and whenever we eat dairy or for example in the form of milk and especially cheese, these peptides are broken down and these enter the body and enter the brain and stimulate certain receptors or bind to receptors which are body's own opioid receptors. And as a result, a lot of people get addicted to these foods, especially cheese. So if you really like cheese and if you really like dairy and you wonder why you can't give up these foods, that's most likely because of these receptors in your brain and because of these peptides or casomorphins which are released from dairy or dairy protein, and as a result of that, you just can't give up your animal-derived proteins. When we switch to whole foods plant-based diet, of course we don't eat dairy. As a result of that, you tend to suffer from less and less food addiction. Now, of course, there are other things and other foods that can still make you prone to addictive behavior when it comes to eating a lot of food. For example, gluten can do it, and some other proteins can do it too. Soy can do it, but at least you can get rid of the dairy-derived protein, which can cause addictive behavior. The next thing is pH balance. So whenever we are eating a lot of protein, a lot of vegetables and fruits, our body's internal pH balance is well maintained. As a result of that, we don't end up with a lot of metabolic derangements. The next thing is insulin levels. So we all know that insulin is necessary. It's an anabolic hormone. It's necessary for building different tissues in the body. But whenever we have too much insulin in our body, we end up with something called insulin resistance. Or whenever we eat too much, or we stimulate our pancreas to make too much insulin, it ends up becoming a situation where the insulin, our body's cells become insulin resistant, and we end up accumulating a lot of fat, and we end up encountering a lot of metabolic derangements. Whole food plant-based diet maintains a level of insulin in the body where we do not develop insulin resistance, and we do not end up accumulating a lot of fat under the skin and on our around our different tissues. The next thing is insulin-like growth factor. Insulin-like growth factor is something that is necessary for growth. So whenever we are children and we are growing up, we need this growth hormone. It can be stimulated by a variety of different factors, and whenever we are simply eating food, it is going to be stimulated. During breastfeeding, all infants have a spike in the insulin-like growth factors because they need to grow. So that is a very normal thing. But when we are adults and we are fully grown, we don't need large quantities of insulin-like growth factor, because insulin-like growth factor is going to cause a lot of tissue growth, and sometimes it can become abnormal tissue growth. It can get out of control, and it can cause all kinds of abnormalities in the tissues, and even can lead to cancer. So you don't want too much insulin-like growth factor. This factor, or this hormone or peptide, is released from animal-derived products. So we don't want to eat or indulge in animal-derived foods which are going to stimulate the release of insulin-like growth factors. A plant-based diet, of course, is going to lower these levels. The next thing, or next few things, are about micrometabolism, or really, really small substances that are extremely important for our healthy metabolism, but are often overlooked. So what are those? Well, so these small substances have a very beneficial effect on our metabolism, or micrometabolism, or metabolism at the cellular level. So what are these small substances? Without going into too much detail, I'll just tell you the names. So these are sulforaphane, which are derived from green leafy cruciferous vegetables. Then there are polyphenols, there are flavonoids, there are phytoestrogens. All of these are mainly derived from plant sources, and not only they have a beneficial effect on the metabolism, they also fight a lot of oxidative stress and inflammation. As a result, our bodies don't age very fast, and we don't get sick too fast. There are some people who would say, well, I'll go ahead and eat animal products, and I can just take a supplement that has the phytoestrogens, that has the sulforaphanes. Well, it doesn't work that way. You actually have to eat the full food, the plant-based foods, so that you can get authentic substances from the plant sources. Then there are resolvins, and resolvins are modified fatty acids which can subside inflammation in the body. So once our bodies get under attack and a cascade of reaction starts, which means the inflammation starts, it has to subside, or something has to overcome the inflammation. There are very few things that can help in that way, and that is the modified fatty acids, which we call resolvins. These are mostly derived from flax seeds and chia seeds and plant-based sources of omega-3 fatty acids. The next few things are short-chain fatty acids. Now, short-chain fatty acids are extremely important fatty acids. They're formed in our gut, and these are formed by our healthy gut microbiome. The gut microbiome is present in everybody, of course, but there are only few people, or only people who eat lots of plant-based foods who have a gut microbiome in such a way where the microbiome can actually generate sufficient amount of short-chain fatty acids. And why do we need these short-chain fatty acids in the form of butyrate, propionate, and acetate? Because these short-chain fatty acids are not just fatty acids. These are actually transmitters or mediators that conduct a whole host of metabolic pathways and help in combating all kinds of inflammation and maintaining our balance. So we absolutely need these short-chain fatty acids. We can't just take a supplement that has these 3 fatty acids or short-chain fatty acids. We need to get them from our plant-based sources. People who are obese or overweight are known to have less amount of short chain fatty acids. Also, people who don't have a proper gut microbiome, they don't really have adequate amount of short chain fatty acids. So in order to improve the growth of these bacteria in the gut who can produce short chain fatty acids, we need to eat a lot of fiber and whole foods plant-based diet. The next few things are basically toxins or the harmful chemicals that are released from animal-based sources, which can cause a lot of diseases and a lot of ill effect on our body. So what are those? Without going again too much into detail, I'll give you the names, and the detail is all on my website, so you can read about it. So the first one is new 5GC, and a lot of people haven't heard of new 5GC. Well, this is a chemical or a compound that is released in the gut whenever we eat animal-based products. And what it does is it causes a lot of inflammation in the body. Not only that, it is shown to actually be a contributor to cancer. The next one is TMAO. TMAO is trimethylamine oxide, and it is a substance that is released from the gut bacteria only when we eat animal-based products. We do not, our gut bacteria will not make this compound if we stay on a vegetarian diet. And what does it do? Well, it again causes a lot of inflammation in the body, causes inflammation of the blood vessels, atherosclerosis, and as a result of that, subsequent diseases. The next thing is heme iron. So heme iron, which is derived from animal sources, is specifically toxic to the body, because what it does is it makes the iron deposit in different organs in the body, and as a result of that, especially men get overloaded with the iron burden, and they can end up with a lot of organ dysfunction. The next few things are basically markers of inflammation, which can rise as a result of animal-based product consumption. So what are those? These are C-reactive protein, which is basically a basic marker of inflammation. So people who consume a lot of animal products, they have elevation of C-reactive protein, which is a telltale sign that there is inflammation going on somewhere in the body. In itself, it doesn't tell us anything, but it's just a general screening marker of inflammation. The next thing is IL-6, which is one of the components of cascade of reactions or inflammatory reactions in the body. And people who eat a lot of animal products, they have higher levels of IL-6. So you don't want that. You want lower levels of IL-6. Then the next few substances are basically specifically derived from animal products or by consuming animal products. These are formed in the body whenever we eat not only animal foods but red meat, and more importantly, barbecue red meat. So whenever we barbecue red meat, what happens is there are carcinogenic substances that are released, and these enter our body and can cause all kinds of adverse effects. Some of these are HCAs or heterocyclic amines, PAH or polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. Then there is dioxins, there is nitrosamines. All of these substances together can cause a lot of damage in the body. And of course, at the time when you're eating the red meat and you're eating the barbecue with a yummy sauce, you don't feel anything, but over time it builds up and can be a major contributor to cancer. The next thing is micronutrients. So whenever we are eating a plant-based diet, it is stapled with a lot of micronutrients, which are extremely essential for different metabolic functions in the body. And we can achieve that amount of micronutrients only when we are eating or relying heavily on the plant-based diet. Animal-based diet or animal-based foods cannot give us appropriate amount of micronutrients. Now let's talk about different organ systems in the body and see how a whole foods plant-based diet helps with improvement of different organ systems and also combat some of the diseases. So first, I'll give you a few things about central nervous system. So people who eat plant-based diet, they have improvement in the cognitive function. Why? Because they just don't have the type of inflammation that we get from the animal products. So there's a lot of data that our cognitive function improves by switching to plant-based diet. The next thing is anxiety and depression. So people who are vegans or who are eating a lot of healthy plant-based foods, they tend to have less amount of anxiety and less depression. This is a correlation. We don't know if there is a causation also. So we don't really have sufficient studies, to prove causation, but we have enough data to show that a healthy diet is going to be linked with improvement in the mood. The next thing is some of the diseases that have to do with the central nervous system. So there is Parkinson's disease. Data shows that dairy product or dairy consumption is linked with the development of Parkinson's disease. There is dementia and Alzheimer's disease. Again, vegan diet or plant-based diet is linked with the reduction in the development of Alzheimer's disease. Again, of course, there is all kinds of the other contributing factors and causative factors, but if we can mitigate at least a few that are under our control, that will lower our chances of developing these horrific diseases. Then there is multiple sclerosis. There are some case studies that show that people with multiple sclerosis were able to reverse their disease by switching to a heavy plant-based diet. There is migraines. So migraines can often be triggered by a lot of different foods, and studies show that a lot of these foods are not only animal-derived foods but animal protein-derived foods. So when people can get their food sensitivity test done, and when they can actually avoid these foods which they have been able to identify as triggers, their severity and frequency of migraines can be reduced. Then there is autism, and people who switch to a dairy-free diet and often gluten-free diet, their symptoms of autism spectrum disorder can also improve based upon quite a bit of data. Then there is cerebrovascular disease, which is basically stroke. So people who have intracranial hemorrhage, oftentimes it is because of the result of high blood pressure or sustained hypertension. And people who eat plant-based foods, they have lesser hypertension, and they have, of course, less risk of developing cerebrovascular disease. And another mechanism by which they have less cerebrovascular disease or less chances of stroke is because they have less inflammation in the blood vessels and less atherosclerosis. So as a result, they don't have thickened and hardened arteries. The next thing is neuropathy. So neuropathy can be caused by at least a dozen different things. And one of the major reasons why we get neuropathy is because of toxin accumulation and diabetes. Diabetes is a major source of neuropathy, especially peripheral neuropathy. And of course, because diabetes can be not only prevented but also reversed with plant-based diet, if we switch to this diet, we will have less neuropathy. So the next couple of things are about eyes or vision. So one of the major causes of blindness in the world is age-related macular degeneration. And oftentimes it happens as a result of oxidative stress and inflammation. And studies show that people who adopt a plant-based diet have lower risk of developing AMD or age-related macular degeneration. The next thing is cataract. That also is much less in people who eat plant-based diet. Now we come to the oral mucosa or the mouth. So people who eat plant-based diet, they have better dentition, better oral mucosa, and better breath. That's because we have better microbiome. The next thing is the neck. So we have thyroid gland in the neck, and that's one of the most important glands in the body because it releases thyroid hormone. Now, people can develop thyroid disease as a result of a deficiency in the micronutrients, or they can develop autoimmune thyroid disease, which is Hashimoto disease. Whenever we switch to plant-based diet, both of these diseases risk goes down. Why? Because plant-based diet has sufficient amount of micronutrients in the form of zinc and selenium and iodine, so it supports our thyroid function. And also, when we are eating plant-based diet, we are not eating all those animal-derived proteins, which are oftentimes the trigger of developing an autoimmune disease in the form of Hashimoto thyroid. So we reduce our risk of developing thyroid disease. Next we will go down to our gut. So gut is one place or one organ in the body that is affected by diet more than anything else. So there are all kinds of diseases that can happen in the gut. There is all kinds of discomfort that can happen in the gut, and I'll just touch upon a few of those. So chronic constipation is one. The people who eat mainly a vegetarian diet or plant-based diet have sufficient amount of fiber in their diet, so they do not suffer from constipation as much at all. Then the next thing is irritable bowel syndrome, which is another very common gut problem. So by eating a healthy plant-based diet, we have less chances of developing IBS or irritable bowel syndrome because our function of the bowel is much better. The next thing is diverticulitis. It's another very common disease of the old age, where there is pockets in the mucosa of the intestine, and that can get infected or can cause a lot of discomfort. By eating a high fiber plant-based diet, we can reduce the incidence and the complications associated with diverticulitis. The next big thing is inflammatory bowel disease, which is in the form of ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease. So whenever we are eating plant-based diet, we can not only reduce the complications associated with inflammatory bowel disease, but oftentimes people can reverse their disease by switching to a healthy diet, because they have less triggers and less inflammation in the gut. The next thing is the acidity in the stomach. So whenever we eat, especially whenever we eat animal-based foods, our body needs to produce a lot of acid, and whenever it's animal products, the need for acid goes up a lot. As a result, we have too much acid in the stomach, and it can cause acid reflux, it can cause peptic ulcer disease, and all kinds of other complications. So of course, switching to a plant-based diet will mitigate that problem too. The next thing is liver. So when it comes to liver, not only the liver function improves with the plant-based diet, because now we have all kinds of cofactors and coenzymes in the form of healthy vegetables and fruit that can help improve the detoxification process in the liver. And liver is the factory of the body where the vast majority of detoxification occurs. But also, when we switch to plant-based diet, we have less chances of developing something which has become so common, and that is fatty liver or non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. The incidence of this disease is rising rapidly, because we not only are becoming more obese, but also we are accumulating the fat on our viscera or our different organs, and liver is one of the major organs that gets affected. By switching to a plant-based diet, people have less chances of developing fatty liver. The next thing is pancreas or pancreatic cancer and colon cancer. So people who switch to a plant-based diet have much less stress on the pancreas, much less inflammation on the pancreas, and they have less incidence of pancreatic cancer. Same thing with colon cancer. They have much less incidence of developing colon cancer, which is one of the major causes of cancer in the world, actually. The next thing is hemorrhoids, and of course one of the major causes of hemorrhoids is chronic constipation. So whenever you are on a plant-based diet, you don't have to worry about developing hemorrhoids. Now let's talk about the cardiorespiratory system. So in the respiratory system, people suffer from allergies, and there's all kinds of environmental allergies, and there are allergies that are triggered as a result of foods that we ingest. So a plant-based diet has less animal-based of course, no animal-based proteins, and these are the proteins that are often the triggers of chronic sinusitis, chronic allergies. So whenever we are on a plant-based diet, we have less chances of that. People who are on a plant-based diet also have less severity of asthma symptoms. As far as the cardiac function is concerned, of course, because of less blood pressure and less cholesterol, the chances of heart disease are going to go down whenever you are on plant-based diet. Then there is the next thing is the breast. So breast cancer risk is much lower in people who eat exclusively plant-based diet. Then there is dysmenorrhea and polycystic ovary syndrome and menopause. All of these three things happen as a result of imbalance in the hormones and dysregulation of the metabolic pathways. So for example, in dysmenorrhea, people have estrogen dominance, or they have imbalance between the estrogen and progesterone. By eating a plant-based diet, they have better detoxification of the body's internal estrogens. As a result, they have much less chances of developing dysmenorrhea symptoms or painful menstrual cycles. The polycystic ovary syndrome, again, is a conundrum of metabolic derangement and hormonal imbalances. So whenever we switch to plant-based diet, not only our insulin resistance goes down, which is one of the major components of polycystic ovarian syndrome, but also the hormone balance gets back into place. So as a result, people who switch to plant-based diet, their symptoms of polycystic ovary syndrome improve, and also their metabolic markers improve. The next thing is menopause. So oftentimes symptoms of menopause can be combated by eating a plant-based diet, and then isoflavonoids, which are found in soy, can also help mitigate some of the symptoms of menopause. The next thing is prostate cancer. So studies show that people who eat no dairy or people who eat very few animal-derived proteins have less chances of developing prostate cancer. On the other hand, people who eat a heavy animal-based diet have more chances of developing prostate cancer. Next thing is about kidneys. So the kidney function improves on the plant-based diet because we have less load of animal proteins. Also, the kidney stone development is less in people who eat a plant-based diet. This is largely because we have less acid to deal with, we have less proteins to deal with, we have less filtration to do whenever we are on a plant-based diet. People who are on a plant-based diet also have less occurrence of urinary tract symptoms. So they have less infections. This is largely because UTIs or urinary tract infections occur as a result of dysbiosis in the gut. And whenever you have a healthy plant-based diet, you have less dysbiosis. So as a result, you have less UTIs or urinary tract infections. The risk of gout is much lesser in people who eat largely plant-based diet. This is because gout is a result of uric acid deposition or uric acid rise in the body, and uric acid is largely derived from animal-based products. So whenever, for example, red meat and cheese and stuff like that. Now, the last thing about the organ systems is, in this category, is erectile dysfunction. So erectile dysfunction, believe it or not, is because of atherosclerosis of the small blood vessels. So it's not necessarily because of the testosterone deficiency that a lot of people think. It's because of the atherosclerosis or inflammation of the blood vessels. So whenever we are eating a plant-based diet, we have less atherosclerosis, less inflammation of not only the major blood vessels which supply to the heart and the brain, but also to the small structures in the body. So people who are vegans or who eat plant-based foods have much less problems with erectile dysfunction. The next few benefits relate to musculoskeletal system and the rheumatological systems. So for example, people who eat plant-based diet, they have less chances of developing osteoarthritis. This is largely because of two reasons. One, they do not necessarily have a high body mass index. As a result, they have less wear and tear on their joints, so they don't have as much arthritis. Also, they have less inflammation in their joints, so which is another contributing factor to osteoarthritis. Then there is rheumatoid arthritis. So studies show that people who remove dairy products from their diet and animal proteins or animal products or saturated fats from their diet have remission of symptoms of rheumatoid arthritis, which is another crippling disease. Then there is lupus, which is an autoimmune disease. So because plant-based diet improves the immune function in the body, many symptoms of lupus or systemic lupus can be improved by switching to a plant-based diet. And there are all kinds of case studies where people have shown to reverse their lupus or systemic lupus by switching to a plant-based diet. The next few things are fibromyalgia. So fibromyalgia is a disease where people have widespread pain in the body. And because when you switch to plant-based diet, you have less inflammation in the body, less mediators which can induce pain, you have remission of symptoms of fibromyalgia. Now the next few things are Myasthenia Gravis, which is an autoimmune disease of the muscles, and it's another very debilitating and crippling disease. And there are case studies, not too many, there isn't too much data, but there are some case studies that show that when people with Myasthenia Gravis switch to plant-based diet, their symptoms get better. The next few things are about bone. So the bone health improves by switching to a plant-based diet. And contrary to what people think that you need milk and dairy to get your vitamin D and your calcium, actually plant-based sources provide you with sufficient amount of calcium and magnesium and all the other vitamins and even the vitamin D if you're eating a healthy, well-balanced diet where you don't necessarily need to supplement, and you can not only improve bone density but actually improve the quality of your bone as well. So that is extremely important to know. Now the next thing is skin. So the common skin problems are acne and eczema and psoriasis. So by switching to a plant-based diet, all of these autoimmune and non-autoimmune diseases with the skin can get better. Why? Because the immune system improves, and all the triggers that come from food that exacerbate the symptoms of these skin diseases will actually be removed from the diet when you switch to plant-based diet. Acne gets better. Why? Because we have less saturated fats in our diet, which is a contributing factor to acne, so we have less symptoms of acne. Now, the next thing is wrinkles. So the studies show that people who switch to plant-based diet, they have less wrinkle formation in the skin. Why? That's because we have less inflammation and less oxidative stress in the layer under the in the layers of the skin, and as a result, you can maintain the integrity of your skin. The next thing is hair and nails. Again, the damage to the hair and nails often occurs as a result of oxidative stress and inflammation with advanced age. So whenever we have less of that, we have less problems with these two organs, which are nails and hair. Now, this is as far as the organ systems are concerned. Now, let's switch to another category, which is basically infections. So there is all kinds of foodborne infections that occur as a result of animal-based products. Some of those are mad cow disease. There is infections that are transmitted to human bodies because we consume animal products, and also because somewhere along the way animals were a part of the chain. So those infections risk can be reduced by switching to a plant-based diet. Then there is antibiotic resistance. So whenever we are eating animal products, believe it or not, most of these, if not all of these animals that are coming through from the factory sources have been fed antibiotics after antibiotics to make them grow, and also to kill all kinds of bacteria in them. As a result, what happens is we are now eating those foods that have all kinds of antibiotics loaded in them, and this results in antibiotic resistance, because now when we get infected by different bacteria, we have more resistance. These bacteria mutate, these change their behaviors where they show more resistance to the common antibiotics. So one of the ways to combat this big problem in the world is by not eating these antibiotic loaded meats. Another thing is response to chemotherapy. So whenever people are not only the plant-based diet lowers the risk of cancer overall, it also improves patients' response to chemotherapy, and their overall improves the overall health whenever they are on chemotherapy. The next few things are about pandemics. So throughout history, there have been so many pandemics in the world. And some of those, for example, the most recent pandemic, or the one that we are still going through, is coronavirus. In the beginning, we had plagues, we had bird flu, we had SARS, we had MERS. We've gone through all kinds of different pandemics, and unfortunately, these will continue to occur every so 100 years or every so often. Because why? Because we handle animals, because we are a part of the big universe where all kinds of different species exist, and of course viruses are going to transmit from one to another. Now, most of these pandemics have spread because human beings handled animals for consumption, and as a result of that, we got infected by the viruses. The viruses found us to be hosts and spread like fire, and the pandemics occurred. So by switching to plant-based diet, of course, we may not be able to completely eliminate the chances of future pandemics, but at least we can mitigate the possibility or the risk. The next thing is toxins. So there are all kinds of POPs, or persistent organic pollutants, and there is all kinds of heavy metals which act as toxins in the body, and we don't want them. At least we don't want them in large quantities. What are the major examples? So these are lead, mercury, arsenic, copper. Animal-based foods are loaded with these toxins, and also loaded with persistent organic pollutants, which we don't want. These cause all kinds of toxicity in the body, the inflammation in the body, and lead to severe organ dysfunction and ill health. By adapting to a plant-based diet, we have less chances of accumulating these toxins in the body. So of course, then we can stay healthy. The next few reasons for why we should switch to plant-based diet is environmental and ecological and economic reasons. So not only we need to switch to plant-based diet because we want to be healthy and our bodies need to stay healthy, but also because our environment needs to be healthy, and also because our economy needs to be healthy. So what are those reasons? Well, the first thing is greenhouse gases. So there is a tremendous amount of adverse effect on greenhouse gases, or tremendous amount of production of greenhouse gases, which are carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide, whenever we consume animal products, and whenever we process them, whenever we develop them, whenever we are engaged in activities where we are producing all kinds of animal foods. So the greenhouse effect gas effect will be reduced if we switch to plant-based diet. Then the next thing is air purification. So formation or the processing of foods which are animal-based foods causes a lot of pollution in the air. So overall air quality also gets poor whenever we are consuming a lot of animal products. Then there is water usage. So it takes a whole lot more water to produce meat or animal products than it takes to make plant-based foods. So for example, whenever we are making 1 pound of beef, it takes 20 times more amount of water than when we are making 1 pound of tomatoes, for example, or another vegetable. So the effect is just so high, the difference is so huge that it just makes sense to not produce a lot of animal products for human consumption. The next thing is tropical rain deforestation. So as we all know, that the tropical rain deforestation is happening all the time, and it's happening very, very fast whenever we are cutting these trees to make animal products and consume them and grow them. So now we come to the last 3 things, or last 3 reasons why we should switch to plant-based diet, and these are powerful reasons. So the first thing is animal cruelty. So whenever we are raising animals to be consumed by human beings, it is often done in very inhumane conditions. Animals suffer, they grow in very, very poor environments. They are often subjected to all kinds of maltreatments, and it's just very inhumane to kill animals and consume them just because we want to satisfy our palate. And there is no nutritional value in animal products that we cannot achieve and achieve even better through consuming plant sources. The next thing is opportunity cost. So there's a lot of opportunity cost lost whenever we are producing animal-based products for our consumption, and it just makes sense to make more plant-based foods to feed the global community as we grow in number. The last thing is food variety. So whenever we are eating plant-based foods, we have all kinds of different colors and textures and taste and different options available, as opposed to whenever we are eating meat, which is just a few shades of brown and red. So I would rather have more variety and more fun with my food while I can stay healthy and stay well and enjoy my life and improve the quality of my life as well. So these are 101 reasons to adopt a healthy, whole foods, plant-based diet. I hope I have convinced you by now. If not, tell me, because I would be very interested to know why you're not convinced. Thank you so much.